Greetings, everyone. This is not the Artcasters. Artcasters will be later tonight on Josh's channel, but I usually try to get 2 videos up every week, and I've been trying to get something going with David Cumbo here. We want to talk a little bit about crowdfunding, so this just seemed like the perfect time to do so. So if anyone's not familiar with David, awesome, just amazing illustrator. You got to check out his stuff. You can go, actually there's a link in the description of this video that takes you kind of to his what is it, BackerKit store?
Yeah, the BackerKit store.
Yeah, and you can see some of his stuff, but also his just Dream Prism Press, is it .com or?
It's dreamprismpress.com.
Yeah, just amazing illustrations, just so colorful and so vibrant and everything. It's really, I mean, I love his stuff. So,
well, thank you very much.
Of course. So yeah, we wanted to kind of sort of do a collab, and I imagine at some point we'll do something on your channel as well. But I've got a Kickstarter going. You ran a successful Kickstarter, but you utilize BackerKit, so basically everything is still available. You can add on to basically, I assume, that campaign. Does it just add to the campaign, or is it totally separate, or how does that work?
It adds to the campaign,
okay.
And it kind of just keeps the total running.
Okay, yeah, because I've talked to some people that have crowdfunded on Indiegogo, and I guess they have a similar thing without BackerKit, where it's just automatic, where you can keep adding to it. And I know for some people that's done pretty well. I mean, I've had my sort of, the Kickstarters I've run, the crowdfunding I've done, I've run on Kickstarter, so I just decided to go with that. But I'm trying to think if it would be advantageous to, after this runs, maybe put it up on Indiegogo as well, because I was talking to a friend of mine, Jeff Lafferty, and he was saying that that if you run a successful Kickstarter, you can just put it on Indiegogo and it will kind of work as that store. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I have to look into it, but even if I ran another campaign, I don't know. Have you ever heard of anybody doing that?
Yes. You mean dual crowdfund sites?
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I was just talking to somebody who was thinking about doing that. He was on Indiegogo and he was thinking about going to Kickstarter.
Okay.
But Indiegogo is interesting because I mean, I'm speaking without a lot of knowledge of Indiegogo specifically, but I do know that there's some differences, and some of the reasons that I chose Kickstarter have to do actually with using BackerKit, which is part of the decision. It's not just like, oh, let's see, I'll use BackerKit because I use Kickstarter. It's also because of the shipping complexity with BackerKit and the fact that you can add multiple items in one order. And I don't know how easy that is to do with Indiegogo. Like you can keep ordering the same reward packages,
right?
But like in Kickstarter, if you pick a reward, you can't order 2 rewards. Like if you want multiple books. So my BackerKit store is set up so that you can order any number of items in any combination anywhere in the world, and it has shipping that's calculated by weight, so it's very, very accurate.
Okay, yeah. So as far as, because I'm not too familiar with BackerKit, I mean, I know what it is and I kind of know the gist of it and everything, but so what kind of percentage do they take, or is it a flat fee, or what? How do they work that?
BackerKit gives you an option. You can either have them take 2% of your Kickstarter total or 3% of your Kickstarter total. And if you do 3%, I chose 3% because at 3% they don't take anything of your orders. And then they also give the option to use PayPal for payments. And I know PayPal is a big deal for international backers.
Right.
That seemed to be a big issue during the campaign. Is I got a lot of messages from people saying that they would like to back the campaign, but they can only pay via PayPal, and Kickstarter doesn't have an option for that. So BackerKit extended that option, but only for the 3% take. So I had to give them, I think for my campaign, I had to pay them something like $1,800. But then that's it. That's all they take. So every order from that point on is the only fee that I have to pay is Stripe or PayPal.
Okay, so now based on, so they take a small cut, but I assume that you've more than made up for that just in the after the campaign is funded, the sales after that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, that's the hope. I mean, in my case, yes, we've passed. I've raised more money, even considering the expenses of all the stuff that has to be produced additionally for the new orders. It has moved into profit for me now with BackerKit. So now at this point, I'm just trying to continue to get backers and supporters to buy the book, because the more, as you know, the more books we have, the cheaper the cost per.
Right. Right.
Well, I don't know. Are you doing a press print, or are you doing a print on demand?
I'm just doing print on demand. Mine's, and I kind of wanted to compare the kind of our two different ways of going about it, because yours is very much, this is kind of, you're funding basically your living. You're doing this to kind of, pay for the, if I'm correct in this, from what I understand, just to give you basically like a salary while you're working on your project and everything. And to produce the book and everything. Whereas mine's produced, but it's not like I've got a lot of like irons in the fire. My comic book is, as much as I love comics and it's my first love, for me, it's not like a huge money maker. So it's kind of a back burner project in some ways. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just want to kind of get it out there, and I guess I'm not too concerned about, making a huge profit from it. Although maybe I should kind of change my mindset, and I'm sure I will when I get to the point where I want to collect everything into a trade, because for me, these single issues that I'm putting out, they're basically just a benchmark, because if I had to create like a full like graphic novel like what you're doing, I probably would never get through it, because it's just such a huge task that I kind of need these stepping stones along the way to say, oh, okay, I've completed this. But really, once I get to the point where I want to put this out in a trade, I really want to kind of take a lot of what you did and try to implement that with BackerKit and with all this other stuff. But for me, one of the reasons, just there are a lot of stuff happened this year as far as, and not bad things, but like some good things with, I got a lot of like freelance work coming in and everything. And I'm kind of on my own again, whereas before I had sort of the art day job and everything. But because of that, I kind of had to take on some of these jobs. So the Kickstarter kind of got pushed back to the point where I was at a point where I had all this stuff that was coming up, conferences and these other deadlines and this other anthology project that I'm working on, that I got to the point where I had this small window where I either launch it now and get it done before all this stuff, or I have to wait till later. And I just kind of decided I'm just going to launch it now, because basically all I need to do is just make enough to print the books, and then I can kind of sell them, or at least the first run of the books, because like we talked about, it's print on demand. But then I sort of got in this thing where I ran into some problems, and I'm kind of beating myself over the head over this when I'm actually forgetting my original intention was just to fund, so I had enough money to make the books. But then we'll get into this a little bit for anyone that's not familiar with kind of what some of the things that happened with my campaign. But it's not performing as well as like my first campaign, which I was hoping it would, but I knew going into it, I wasn't probably going to be able to concentrate as much on this campaign as I did the last one. So that shouldn't surprise me, but it's still all this other stuff that happened that kind of made it difficult. And I'm kind of like,
definitely had some bad luck there.
But I gotta, I've got to kind of get over that and just go back to my original intention was just like, let's get this thing done. Let's get it out there and everything. But so that's kind of the way I went about it. But you, I mean, the planning and everything that went into yours, and I want to talk a little bit for anyone that's not familiar with what you're doing, because it's really a brilliant strategy. Because I'm just going to set it up, but I'm sure you can go into it a little more in depth. But you kind of went after some properties and sort of did a license on an existing property that had an existing fan base, and was able to, convince the owners of the property to kind of partner with you on this and build your brand. And hopefully, and it sounds like you're going to do more of these, but hopefully with this going, now that you've had this track record and you've shown all this, eventually I'm sure you want to start, because you've got your own original creation with Dreamside and everything. So why don't you let everyone know a little bit about how your Kickstarter kind of came to be, and how that whole thing went, how you approached it and everything.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a long story. I'm gonna try and consolidate my
All
mind
right.
here before I start rambling on like I normally do and take
That's
all
an
the time.
interesting story, though. I think anyone's going to be fascinated with it, because I haven't heard of anyone else that has done this, and I just think it's just an incredible model. So,
Well, now I'm going to talk about it, and everyone will go do it, so I'll have no chance.
I don't know if anyone could. I mean, people could. That's the thing. That's the thing, and I always tell people, you could explain. I could sit here and explain everything I do, but the chance that somebody's actually going to take the time and effort to do that and have the skill that you have to execute it, not too many people are going to be able to do that. So.
I appreciate that. I really do, man. But it's one of those funny things. I was just talking to somebody today who was, and I'm not getting sidetracked here. I just want to make a point to what you just said. But I was just talking to somebody today who's trying to become an animator, and every now and again I get somebody who reaches out and says, "Hey, give me some advice. I'm trying to get into the industry in some capacity." And I always kind of say the same thing. Like if somebody says, well, I want to become an animator, or I want to make a book, or I want to do something. And well, the first thing I say is, why me? Because I've only done one. Ask somebody with some experience. But the one thing that I can say is it's not really whether or not you can do it. It's whether or not it's worth it. Because pretty much anybody can do this stuff. It's just that it's going to take a lot of time. Like in my case, I have a certain amount of talent that is somewhere on the spectrum, right? That somebody has a lot of talent, somebody has a little talent. It's really kind of pointless because I'm somewhere in here, right? If the very top is Michelangelo and the very bottom is, let's see, who's a terrible
You probably don't want to mention the very bottom.
my buddy in college, I'll blame. He's the very bottom.
Okay.
So right next to him is me. So basically, if you have, regardless of your talent, it's going to take you a certain amount of time to accomplish something. And it just comes down to whether or not it's worth it. And what a lot of people find is that it really sucks a lot of your life away, Princess Bride style. So it's dangerous. It really is kind of dangerous, but you can accomplish it. It's just, you might be surprised when you do that you're not as satisfied with what you did. So I always tell people that you can, first point is you can do this. Anybody can do this, regardless of what they tell you about talent. But it just, interestingly enough, it catches you off guard because you don't realize, oh, I didn't realize I could do it. It's just that I would have to spend 10 hours a day with no weekends for 5 years before I get to where I want to be, which is the case with me. I was just telling somebody today, I haven't really had a day off in 2 years. So I love what I do so much that it's, every day is a day off when you do what you love. You know how that goes. But anyway, to get into the history of the Kickstarter, basically I'd worked in games. I came from animation and games. I worked for Insomniac Games, which is the Ratchet & Clank studio, and they just put out that new Spider-Man game, which I didn't get to work on. I was not there for that, but so I can't take credit for it because everyone always recognizes Spider-Man, but no one knows that it was Insomniac. So that's the problem with getting licenses. So I left to form a company doing graphic novels. My intent was to do original projects from the beginning. I had a project that I had loved. I wrote it back in just after college, so it was a long time ago, back in the Stone Age of 2004. And I wrote a script for an animated film. Of course, it was a post-college, overly ambitious, naive individual thought, oh, I can make an animated film. Why not? I'll go to New York and convince some multimillionaire to give me money to make a movie. Of course, I didn't know that the challenge isn't getting the money. It's getting the distribution for a movie. So there's so many challenges that I ran into with trying to get something done, but I always stayed focused on the fact that I wanted to tell a particular story, and then I wanted to tell 53 more stories. I just want to tell stories in some format. So I ended up looking into books because that was something I could do on my own. I realized, I don't really need a team of people. I don't need a lot of money. I just need to pay the bills and survive. So books are good for that. And it didn't hurt that when I had talked to some people at film studios, like I got a chance to talk to somebody at Paramount at one point about, starting out and getting a film studio to work with you. And I was just kind of, what is that? Waxing poetic. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
About just how philosophically everybody's thinking in this industry. And, what he told me is that we really don't invest in people we don't know. And I said, that's one of the chicken and the egg problems, right, with the industry for animation, where it's how do you get to be well known if you can't make a film so that you can be well known so that you can make a film. And what I said to him is, what if what if I came with a property that people recognize? And he said, you know, you mean like a book or something? And he said that was a great idea. And I said, okay, good. I'll go make a comic. And I had worked in storyboarding at the time. And I thought comics will be so easy because storyboarding is harder, right? Because you got to do all these storyboards and think about the cinematics and the layout like that. And then I found out that comics are the hardest thing I would ever do.
Yep.
By far. Comics are 8 times harder than storyboarding, 10 times harder than storyboarding. Because you have to factor the sort of the meta fit of the page. You got the panel layout, but then you have the layout of the panel within the page. And if you have a visual focused brain, you want it to be nicely laid out. It's very hard to balance those two. So I worked on this comic, and I created like a video series for a long time over the course of maybe about a year, where I would put the chapters up on my YouTube channel, and I would have, you know, I had my friend Michael do composition for it, and I had a narrator, and I ended up converting the book into an illustrated book comic book mix. It was kind of which is what it is now. It's sort of a cross between the two. I still call it a graphic novel, so I can actually get someone to buy it. but it's pretty much a mix between the two. It's what's perfect for the story, because I needed a lot of narrative text, too much for a comic. But I wanted the fun. I wanted the amount of panels you get with a comic. So I kind of crossed the two. Mm-hmm. So after 2 years of doing this and putting that up, I would spend 30 days on a chapter. I probably at that time I was doing 14-hour days, you know, for 30 days straight. And then I would spend the last 3 days working almost just straight through for 3 days to get a video animation done. And so I could have a monthly release, and I would put it up on YouTube, and a few days would go by and I'd have like 30 views on it. And I thought, oh my God, because the proportion of work to the payout for that was so little. Of course, I wasn't selling anything. So it just beats you down, you know, just year after year, you do this stuff. But of course, I'm not the given up type. So I'm an eel. I just slip into something else. In what I realized was maybe I need to get the help of some publisher or something who can give it some exposure. And I did interest some publishers in Dreamside. But what they told me, you know, they were all excited about the project. And I remember talking to a couple of these publishers, and they said, oh, this is great. This will be a great book. Wonderful. And I thought, this is great. They're going to sell 20,000 copies of Dreamside, and I'm going to make $1 million. And they said, well, you know, since this is your first book, and you know, we're going to do kind of a cheaper edition of it. We'll put out there and you'll sell 500 copies. And I said, oh man. and so I think the idea was that they had intended to take this on as a first project that you could then grow from. You could do more projects after that, and that would be more successful. And this, of course, was a trilogy. So it had a lot of potential for, you know, to resell the first books. And so I think it was more about just developing a relationship with a publisher. But this is the key that kind of led into Kickstarter. In my mind, is that publishers, and this is not universal, okay, so I don't want to sound like I'm bad-mouthing anybody here, but this is just about objectives. This is about goals. Okay, everyone has different goals, and sometimes what I found when I was talking to publishers is that our goals were not in sync in the way that they might have been in the 80s or the 90s, where a publisher's intent, that I assume to most people, which seems fairly obvious, would be, I'm going to take this property, I'm going to print it in a book, I'm going to market it, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it successful, because if it does well, then, you know, we profit as well as the artist, right? Makes sense. But what a lot of publishers right now seem to be doing is they're taking on an awful lot of properties, and they're putting out an awful lot of books very quickly. And it's sort of the, you know, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks, you know, sort of pasta analogy. And hopefully one book sells 1 million copies and they'll be good. But the problem is that's great for that one book, and it's great for the publisher, but it's not so great for the other 38 books they put out that year that kind of get dropped by the wayside. And I kept hearing horror stories about how people would end up having a bunch of books sold, but they would make very little money. Now I'm going to tell you something. I can't tell you who this is, but I'll tell you that just a case point example. If you want to know how little money you can make as a published author for a mainstream, this is a mainstream author in a mainstream publication, and in 1 year, something like 50,000 books were sold for this author. So 50,000 of this author's books were sold. And for that, he made $20,000.
Oh, jeez.
So he made poverty wages in a, you know, being basically a famous author. So I thought, well, there's something wrong with this model. And, you know, I did talk to a publisher friend of mine who, again, I don't want to tell you who it is, but somebody in publishing who is very, very kind and took 2 hours out of his day to sit down and say, Dave, your plan to publish with a publisher for this is a bad plan because you're not going to ever make any money on this. You know, I mean, you might do it for 5 years and maybe 10 years, and you'd start bringing in some money. But even then, it's very risky, and you don't know that it's going to be successful from that point on. So you got to figure something else out. And I said, well, what about like doing a direct sale kind of thing? Like, what if I had an audience, you know, that I could just sell the book to direct? I mean, I was confused on the phone with him because he would tell me these numbers and he would say, oh, you know, like I had a publisher with, at one point that was considering Yuka, and they were Yooka-Laylee, which is the book now. And they were saying, you know, if you sell through us, we'll put it in stores. You'll probably sell like 20,000 copies of Yuka. And I said, oh, that sounds really good. And then I checked with my publisher friend. He said, good, you'll make, you know, about $10,000 on that. And I said, this is ridiculous. Like, how can you, people are making a living doing this stuff. You know, I'm not crazy, right?
Right.
There has to be a way to do it. And so I thought, look, if I have a book and it costs $30, okay, if I put a $30 price tag on it, like I'm at a convention or I have a lemonade stand, okay, it's Dave's book stand, all right, and I got my book. Here it is, and here's my piles of books, and it says $30 on it. And somebody comes by and they give me $30, then there are really two things that I have to take out of that: the cost to make the book and my taxes. Okay, and if someone pays with a credit card, some sort of a fee. Okay, so I thought, all right, what is my cost per book? Well, you know, whatever that is and whatever the taxes are going to be, I take that out. And I thought that actually should leave enough money that you should be able to, if you were to sell, say, 1,000 or 2,000 books, you won't be rich, but you can at least pay the rent and your bills to a point. I thought there's got to be a way to do this. And he said, yes, but the question is, how do you get the audience? You know, and so, you know, that was a question I kept bringing up to publishers, is like, well, how do you get the audience? And what I found with a lot of publishers is a publisher does not, a lot of people think that, well, if I sign with a publisher, they're going to put a lot of marketing money in that I don't have. But the problem is that the publisher is probably only going to put in the amount of marketing money proportionate to the value you bring to them as an author. So if you're a brand new author and they have to overspend on marketing for you, it doesn't work out. The math doesn't work out. And it's not because of greed or bad planning on the part of the publisher. It's just the nature of having so many people involved. Because look at how many people are involved in selling a book the traditional way. You have a retailer, you know, you have the store that is going to buy the book wholesale. So if you have a $30 book, you're going to sell it to them for $15. So they actually just made 50% of the sale, is another way of looking at that. You know, assuming that you sell it $15 on a 30, like 50% off, right? Because they have to make a profit on the book, and that's typical, right? And then you have the distributor, because stores don't buy from me directly; they'll buy from a distributor, and the distributor has a fee. And what's left, you have to split with the publisher, okay? And the publisher might have some fees that they're not being clear with you about. I mean, you might be paying for their coffee. You know, I've got coffee; it costs money too. So I might only make a fraction of $1 on a book when all is said and done. So even though it's a $30 book, I might only make $1. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think there's a catch-22 now where, you know, a publisher now, they want you to have a following. But if you have the following,
you don't need the publisher.
In some ways, do you need the publisher?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there are definite benefits to the publisher, and I'm trying to be very you know, I have a tendency to kind of jump to conclusions a little bit with this stuff. You know, you get excited about it and you think, okay, I have all the answers now. You know, publishers are useless. We don't need them anymore. We'll just go directly. But absolutely not. I mean, publishers serve a great benefit. For one thing, publishers do allow for an incredible amount of reach that you can't really get. And so this is what I often say to people who are asking about this process now, not even getting into Kickstarter yet. Just what's more important to you, is actually making money on the thing that you made or having a larger following? Okay, and a publisher does still put you in a position where you're probably going to be able to generate a larger following. Okay, so if you sign with a publisher, you know, I have good friends over at publishing companies like First Second, for example. Now, First Second does a great job with advertising the books that they put out. They're very good about letting people know that these books exist. You know, a colleague of mine, Ben Hatke, who puts out Zeta the Space Girl, great book. You know, and Mighty Jack. I think it's Mighty Jack, something like that. It's Jack Who's Mighty. It's Ben Hatke's Jack book. Mighty Joe Jack. It's gonna drive me nuts. Why don't I know the name of that book? Anyway,
I won't say just Mighty Jack, but I could be wrong. I know Zeta the Space Girl. I've read that one. But.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's a neat. I love the beginning of the third book on that, which is the first part that I read. There's so much whimsy in those books. So anyway, he likes working with the publisher, and you still, of course, have famous authors and people who are still working with publishers. Like, they don't go independent. I mean, why does I don't know, any given famous comic author still go through a traditional publisher? There's a reason to do it.
Right.
They take on a lot of responsibility. So it's not about what's really even looking at, is it a good or a bad thing with the publisher? It's just, what's your specific situation? And what I thought is, okay, this at the very top of what's important to me, the very, very, very top thing is that I want to be able to make the stuff I want to make my way. All right, that's the very top thing. That's the artist arrogance. I want to do my thing, okay? Because that's why I'm doing it, so I can put my art out into the world, right? And when you say that, you might think initially, well, you have to have something original. And so I did the original thing, and that's still coming. But there are so many ways to do an original thing. Like, can you do an original thing with somebody else's creation? Yes, sure. It's just not it's not an original character. But say, for example, I were to work with some famous property like the Muppets. Okay, all right, I could take the Muppets and I could make a Dream Prism Muppets book. That would be neat. And I would make it my own. I'd find a way to get the passion that I need to get that project made the right way. And then I would do a good job with it. And then that would be something. And that's just as good to me as doing something original. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if anyone's ever seen or read Roger Langridge's Muppets, I mean, that's a perfect example, because it is the Muppets, and you can definitely tell his style and everything, his humor and his illustration style. I mean, it's a really great book if you're not familiar with his work or not. But
I'm not actually. I want to look into it though.
Yeah, definitely look into it, because if you're a fan of the Muppets, I mean, it's great stuff. But
the Muppets are the best. I put a lot of Kermit reference without realizing it. Believe me, in Yooka, because those kind of mushy facial expressions with Kermit the Frog are the funniest thing. I mean, there's nothing funnier. What do you got? What do you got? I didn't even see that. Did you just pull Kermit down?
Oh, yeah, there's Kermit, and then right next to him, this is my friend Jay Ferguson, who's an awesome airbrush artist. But
wow, what do we got here? Oh, neat.
Yeah, that is not a photograph. That is an airbrush. That's an airbrush piece.
Oh wow. Oh, I was wondering why do you have a photograph? Yeah, no. But that is pretty neat.
He's my inspiration, so he's right up here.
Oh man, yeah, he's a legend. Yeah. Oh God. He just makes you get butterflies just thinking about the Henson process and just what they accomplished and how much genuine art and storytelling was involved with the Muppets and the Henson Workshop in general. Yeah. I get to meet somebody from the Henson Workshop actually at Comic-Con last year who came up to the table with my Dreamside stuff and was asking about it. And so I got a chance to talk to some folks over there. I love the Muppets. I love the Dark Crystal. Very happy to hear that there's some new Dark Crystal stuff coming out. Excited about that. I think it's through Netflix, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's easy to get distracted with the stuff. It's exciting. No. You got me thinking about the Muppets, man. So funny. It's so funny. Anyway, so it's about prioritizing. What is it that is important to you? And to me, it was, okay, I want to be able to make something that I can be passionate about and have control over it. And so I thought, okay, have that with Dreamside. But now the problem is I really don't think I have the audience to be able to make a living doing that. Now, in order to do a book like Dreamside is the most complicated art. It's very, very, very detailed. It's even worse than Yooka. And it's such a pain to do those illustrations. They're wonderful and they're invigorating, but they're so laborious. And in order to do that, I have to do it full time. Okay, like if I was at a job, right, I could not make a book like Dreamside. It would be a different type of book. I could do something faster. I could do something that has fewer illustrations, maybe shorter books, shorter stories. But that's kind of a major problem that we have now in the industry, is that I hear a lot of people talking about how the art in modern comics sometimes feels a bit rushed, or is a bit loose, and it doesn't. You hear them saying, "Oh, it's not like in the old days," right? But the thing is, there's a good reason for that. It's not a lack of talent. There's actually more talent than there's ever been, I think. The problem is that the deadlines are so rushed because no one's making money, because the publishers are struggling because they're trying to find that book that will sell, and so they try and get as many books done as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, because they don't have a ton of money to throw into this process, because comics don't make as much money as they used to. And maybe they don't make as much money as they used to because they're not made with the same level of passion maybe per book as they used to be. And so you have this zigzagging downward spiral. And I thought, wait a minute, hold on, pump the brakes. Let's reset the whole process. Let's reset the whole process. Let's rethink the whole thing. And let's go back to the 70s. Let's go back to the 80s and think about how this was done then. You could have at a certain point in time, you would get these works of incredible passion. And I've done the thought process of, okay, is this just me getting old and thinking through my nostalgia? But in the 80s, we got E.T. Okay, in the 80s, we got The Goonies, we got Star Wars, we got Indiana Jones. Okay, we got movies like I think was Tron 80. Tron was 80s. Yeah. You got you had an explosion of creativity in the 80s, and the top of the industry and the indie folks that could be even known in the 80s were all producing brilliance. And it of course you got a lot of crazy things too, but even the crazy stuff seemed to be so much fun. You got Back to the Future. There was so much incredible content made in the 80s. And I think part of the reason for that's a little bit different from how it's done today is because of the spirit of production has turned into, okay, we're out of time, we're out of money, and we just need to get something out there. And so you can't make something that's going to really shake hearts. Okay, that's a goal. You want to shake the reader's heart. That's how you make something powerful. Shake the heart. You got to grab the heart and shake it. Okay, if you can do that, then the reader will be affected psychologically by what you create. And that's how you get these things like E.T. that you can't watch now without getting a tear in your eye, because the movie is so profound. And so I wanted to kind of hit the reset button and think, like, how could we go back to that way of working where I could spend 2 years on a book and do it full time and make a living? And I'm not entirely confident that that's totally possible unless you happen to get lucky and have a big seller. But what I could do is work with a direct sale if I had the audience, that if I could sell enough books direct, and you don't have to sell that many. I really only have to sell about 2,000 books. Like if I sold 2,000 copies of Yooka, that would probably pay my way to a decent but modest living. Okay. So that would be like, that would be great for me. Now with Yooka, I think we're at about 1,000 books. We're probably a little over 1,000. If you factor digital sales, we're at probably about 1,200, right? So we're not too far away from that. I'm not quite there yet. But maybe on the next one, we'll see. But the thing about it is, if you can truly make something that will shake the hearts of 2,000 people, that 2,000 people hopefully will want to support you in the future as well. And so instead of trying to tackle the market and become a million seller, so you can make pennies on the dollar for 1 million books, instead, I figure, why not try and have a truly deep engagement with a small number of people, who really care about what I'm making, who I can talk to on Twitter and have interactions with, and then produce something that they can see get developed along the way, and really start to increase what I'm doing? I'm kind of doing a reduction, right? Like you make sauce, and I'm doing a reduction on it so that you're getting a slow simmer of something that's really got a ton of passion and polish in there, like an absurd level. Like people make fun of me because of how long I spend on pages. But I think it's the way to reset things. Okay, is get that quality back in there that we used, that that care and quality that you used to get in the 60s and 70s when stuff was in the 80s, you know, when you had that those longer development periods and people had a little bit more time to flesh things out. And you weren't as concerned about as being that you weren't as concerned about having so much content. It was more just about the quality. All right. And so for me, Kickstarter just became a way to sell things directly. And I thought of Kickstarter before I thought of the game tie-ins. So Kickstarter was simply, I'll sell directly. That's great. So if I'm going to sell 500 books through a publisher, okay, I'm going to sell 200 books through a direct sale, and 50 of them will be people I know, right? So Dreamside is not the right first project, because what I would do with Dreamside is, bear in mind also, I have another thing that I'm doing, which is I'm producing very high quality books. They've actually done a few extra things since we last talked. The books have like a library reinforced binding. There's hand sewn. They have, if you got the backer edition, you get gilded edges on it. There's foiling, embossing. The 100-pound paper inside. We are going with 100-pound paper. It's nuts. It's like the heaviest internal stock you can reasonably get. Every page is going to look. We're doing a Pantone die. That's one I haven't talked about yet. Nobody knows what this stuff means. Nobody cares, but we're doing it. So Pantone die is like, you know, you get your 4-color press. You get your cyan, magenta, yellow, black. There's 2 things that we're planning. I don't want to commit to one of them, but we're going to do cyan under black. They do this thing called cyan under black, where you lay a 10% cyan down, and there's another pass. There's an extra 5th pass of black. And the reason you do it is it makes the black super rich, like really deep, because it's like putting a primer on a wall before you put the paint down. Books typically, they put the inks down and they soak into the paper, and oftentimes it's cheap paper, so it gets grayed out and kind of, you know, it doesn't get that rich. The cyan under black, that's when you can kind of feel the black, like you can feel it on the paper because it lays down a little. You ever get a book like that where you could actually see the black ink?
Oh yeah.
That's the process. That's
nice.
Gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So cyan under black, and the dye is an after it's a wash, basically like doing a glaze, and it gives the paper a tone. So it kind of gives it we're gonna do kind of like a golden, like a little bit of just a slight warm tint to the book to give it that nice. It's gonna look very organic. Every page will look like an art print. Anyway, where was I? So Kickstarter is a way to sell directly, right? And that way I can say, okay, I'm going to cut out as many of the expensive procedures as needed. I don't need distribution in the traditional sense. I don't have to sell it on Amazon. You know, I can just sell it through my store. And then what I thought is I'll start with that, and we'll see how many I can sell doing this. And then I'll learn what I have to change from there. So instead, I said, okay, Dreamside is great, but what I really need is a project that has an audience already, because I don't really have the marketing money to put into developing an audience. And I tried for years to build one. And, you know, I for one reason or another, I mean, some people are able to do that. Some people are really not. Beware the big following too. Like, you might have 90,000 Instagram followers, but that doesn't mean you're going to have a successful Kickstarter. Those numbers don't always translate. So bottom line is, I thought I need to make something for an audience that already exists. And so what I did was I searched for something that I knew, which is in the gaming industry, and something I love, which is games, and something that I know is kind of a rich platform from which to draw all of these great materials. I mean, the great characters, great worlds, but games are all about gameplay. And, you know, unless they're specifically a story-based game, you're typically playing a game to play the game. And so a book, something that could work in tandem with the game, would be something that would be awesome, especially if it was for these indie titles that have kind of a modest following, but they're really cool. They're really great games with great characters. And so what I did was I shot for a few studios that it just didn't work out. And it was right around the time that Yooka-Laylee was announced as the game. Kickstarter was announced, and I connected with the studio, and it was a lot of back and forth. In fact, I had to wait like a full year before they would talk to me about it, because they were just so early on at that point. And eventually I was able to get them to agree, and they, you know, here's the situation where they have whatever the game's audience is. And so, you know, we got to see like what that translates into in that particular circumstance. And so now I'm doing this with more games. And I do have 7 studios actually that I'm talking to right now about future projects. So I've kind of bit off more than I can chew. But I'm working on some ways to speed up production right now. And so I think you're going to end up seeing these more numerous and more frequently than you might be expecting.
Yeah, you're going to have to start a studio and actually, you know, hire people to help or illustrate or put this whole thing into, I don't know.
As soon as I have enough money to pay somebody for help, that's the first the first thing that I desperately need help with is organization.
Right, yeah.
I need someone to help me with paperwork because I'm an artist and I don't, it just doesn't compute. It terrifies me. I keep thinking, oh, I wake up, I get that paperwork anxiety. Like, oh, did I file my taxes the right way? Am I doing my paperwork? I don't even know where to begin with that stuff. It's terrifying. So that's something I need help with. Luckily, I have my generous fiance who has been helping me with that stuff. But you know, you can only ask for that for so long. So yeah, it'd be very nice to get some help with some of that stuff, and then we can get to the artist assistance, which would be really, really good.
So how did you go about approaching? Was it Insomniac Games? You said?
No, Insomniac was the studio I worked for. So this is Platonic Games is the studio that developed Yooka-Laylee. I approached them through the composer, the main composer on the game is Grant Kirkhope, who I got to know Grant when he had just left Rare and he had moved to the States, and it was right around the time that he had composed music for a game called Kingdoms of Amalur, and that studio shut down and Grant was out of a job and he was looking around. I remember him talking to me at Insomniac at the time, and we sort of had some conversations about, you know, what would be good places for him to look into and all that. And he did end up, interestingly, out in the West Coast, which was kind of a goal of his. He wanted to be by the beach. So we just became kind of, I guess you can call it internet friends for what it's worth, and just industry internet friends. Yeah, he connected me because he was doing the music on the game. And I said, you know, maybe, you know, it'd be cool if we could do a book. And I think I had approached him before Yooka-Laylee was announced because I had the feeling that the Rare crew from Rare that had left, a lot of the Banjo-Kazooie people, had intent to get back together. You can just kind of feel these things are happening. I don't know why, but that one I got a really strong sensation for, and I thought, you know, I'm gonna tease Grant, because Grant's the type of person who he has a tendency to accidentally say things he's not supposed to say. What is it called? A loose cannon. That's the word. Yeah. So I thought, if anybody will spill the beans, it'll be Grant. So I think Grant had hinted at one point that there was something going on. And I thought, okay, I don't need any more information. I want in some way, because I love Rare games. I loved the whole, you know, the Banjo-Kazooie games. I love that whole legacy that they had accomplished. It was just wonderful games. And I thought, oh, if I can be involved in some way. And so this was actually when I was still at Insomniac. So it was before I had even left to work on Dreamside. So this Yooka really I had a connection since probably like 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
But it eventually became Yooka, and that's the studio, you know, wasn't ready when I reached out to them. The story was too early. I kept getting the, you know, call us back in 8 months or whatever. And then, hit us up in 2 months and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually it was Team 17, actually the publisher that, of the game, that really pushed it to happen. And I've got to thank Debbie Bestwick for that, the head of the Team 17, who was very influential.
Yeah, awesome. So kind of take me behind the scenes of like the idea of like basically setting up the Kickstarter. So you I don't know, this might go on for a while, but I mean, you just had some really unique ways of approaching it. Just with the cross promotion with the game company. Of course, it seems like you did all the right steps. You went through backer kit. You really, you know, have quality product. Now, one thing that a lot of times I'll recommend to people, especially on your first Kickstarter. Now, is this your first Kickstarter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so not too bad to fund at what was like 67,000.
I think we're 62. I think we earned 62 on Kickstarter.
Okay, okay, and then you've got a little bit since then. I'm back, but that's pretty impressive, and I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the partnering with with the game studio and everything.
I think that was most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a quality product. But the one thing that I always say is like, it's usually better to have your work complete before going. I mean, that's kind of the route I go. But I mean, but yours is obviously an exception to that rule. I mean, and maybe that's more of a comics thing, because I know if you're developing like a board game or something, to have that already produced might be a little too much or whatever. And yours, I mean, your comic is, or your book is, it's a lot more involved, a lot more pages, better quality, pretty much everything, very premium product. So, and the way you mocked it up and everything was just great. I mean, people get to kind of see exactly what they're getting with the, that kind of unique foil cover and all that stuff. But did you ever have any concern that, I mean, obviously you've been doing games, so you can prove yourself that way, that you have a history, you've worked professional and everything like that. But you ever have any concern about either being able to deliver or prove that you're going to be able to deliver on the project?
Well, with the book, yeah. Well, you actually touched on the main thing there, which was I have historically had a tendency to take a long time on projects, and so that's one of the reasons I've never asked for money. Right. I think it's kind of irresponsible to ask for money if you're going to take a lot of extra time. So I thought there's a lot of times with Kickstarter, including many Kickstarters I backed, where they have an expected delivery date, and then you get it 2 years after that date, and I'm thinking, I don't want to do that, because I'm not thinking of Kickstarter as a kickstart. I'm thinking of it as a store. For better or worse, I think of it as it's a pre-order for something. And until I'm absolutely sure that I can deliver, I didn't want to do the campaign. Now, when I first talked to Team 17, I said, this will probably take me 10 months to a year. So 2.5 years in total is what it's going to be. So that's a horrible underestimate of the amount of time that it takes. Now, to be fair, I did change the format. I lengthened the book. I ended up using a much fancier style for the art than I expected. There's a lot more rendering. I was going to do kind of more of I wasn't doing things like bounce lighting, and I wasn't doing like a bounce light pass and a radiosity pass and stuff like I'm doing now. But these are the things that happen during a project, as you realize, there's potential for this to be like something really beautiful. And I want to make it that, because I've taken it this far. Yeah. So that's always my logic. And same thing happened with Dreamside, where I would redo it again and again and again until it was perfect in my mind. Perfect for me is when you can't make it better, just different. Yeah. And so I thought, all right, I've got to get these 2 books to perfect, but we're talking years, right? And so I thought, all right, I have a tendency to do this, so I'm going to wait until I know that I can deliver, and then I'll do the Kickstarter. And it turned out that was about 2 years in. So I had to work without any sort of chance of making a dime on it for 2 years. In fact, I didn't have a contract for 2 years. I signed the contract just a few months before the Kickstarter. Oh. So they could have just canceled the whole project at any given time 2 years in if they wanted to. There would be no recourse. But I did that for a reason. I did it because I want them to trust me and know that the book is going to be good. So I would just work, I would have to trust them, and I did plenty of jokes with them. I'd be like, I'll send the Sicilians after and that sort of thing. They didn't find that as funny as I did. But, but the thing is, it was a matter of trust. And I thought with anything with this is like, trust is everything. The contract is, people overvalue contracts anyway, because contracts are so easy to get out of if you have the right lawyer. And I thought, it was a big studio is going to sign a contract with me. It's like, what am I going to do with this piece of paper? Like, look, you signed the contract. I have the rights to do it. It's like, well, you didn't fulfill item number 18/section 3 XY elemental P. And so we're going to cancel the project and that sort of thing. And I thought it just has to be trust, right? It has to be trust. And so I worked on trust, and they trusted me and I trusted them. And then we all just sang Kumbaya, and it was very, very nice. And then at that point, also the other thing too, is they did not want to do a Kickstarter. So that's the other thing, is I didn't really talk about this during the Kickstarter, because I was in the Kickstarter phase, but that I will say that Playtonic Team 17 were not happy about the idea of a Kickstarter. So the only way to be able to do it was for me to host it, you know. And so two things that we could have done that probably would have guaranteed significantly higher sales of the book. One, if it was labeled as an official development by Playtonic, that would have helped. And then thing number two is if Playtonic had hosted the Kickstarter, that would have helped. Now their game Kickstarter had 73,000 backers. So that was a massive, massive success.
Yeah.
And what the gamble, or the compromise in a way was, we'll let you do it, but you have to host it. It has to be a Dream Prism thing. It can't be a Playtonic thing. And they were very, very, very concerned about irritating backers or sounding like they were money grubbing or trying to, you know, go back to the beginning and start over and kind of ask for a kickstart. Again, they said this has to be marketed as a Dream Prism thing. And so they were very conscientious in terms of how they approached it. And they made sure that this was a Dream Prism thing, which is why the Kickstarter focuses so much on myself as an individual. Like literally starts to me, I'm like, hi, I'm Dave. So that there's no doubt that this is a separate company. And that does seem to have worked to alleviate the anger toward Playtonic. At the same time, it was a bit of a sacrifice that I had to make to do that because, you know, it just, for sure, I think that's something that if people see it as a fan production, it just doesn't have the prestige. It doesn't, you know, people who are big fans of the studio say, well, that's cool, but it's like they might think it's a cash in and, you know, just some jerk doing something with their beloved characters, and they might even have resentment to it for that reason. So, you know, that's the trade-off.
Yeah, for one, it doesn't look like a fan production at all. For the second thing is, I think in the long run, I think it's going to be advantageous for you because, I mean, your goal is to eventually start doing your own original stuff, and by building, you know, you're basically taking a lot of their audience, and it's on your platform. It's on Dream Prism's Kickstarter profile. So, you know, as you continue to go on. And if you do more of these, and if you can work out the same deal, I think going forward, even if somebody wants to do it on theirs, I think it might make sense to continue doing it on yours. Build that Kickstarter audience, because that audience is pretty much yours, assuming that Kickstarter doesn't, you know, pull any shenanigans or fold or whatever. Like certain things happen, you know, like
or suddenly things
issues with like Facebook and things.
power down at launch. No, you're right, and of course that's a great benefit. It's just in the case, and I agree with you. In general, I do want to host the campaign. It benefits me to do that. It's just in the case of Yooka-Laylee, they had such an outstanding Kickstarter that if they were to host, I'm just saying that I think we probably would have gotten more support for it. Not that I'm in any way dissatisfied with what we got, but I do have to consider. It's funny that even when you have these successful campaigns, so much of that money goes into paying for the production. And like for example, we had a stretch goal, you know, that we hit to do foil stamping and embossing on the cover. We're doing some really fancy stuff with that. But to produce those, you have to produce brass dies that have to be sculpted, and you know, they do 3D sculptures and cut out of the brass and that sort of thing. And it's very, very expensive to produce those dies. You have like a flat fee for the die, and then you have a per book cost to put them in. So by unlocking that stretch goal, what it did was it raised the cost of every book that had already been paid for. So you got to be careful with these kinds of things with Kickstarter. Just make sure you know. Now I was aware of this difference, which is why that stretch goal was like $20,000 over the goal. So it accounted for the added cost it would put on the stuff that was already accounted for, because you have to think like that. So yeah, but in terms of the prep, you know, it was pretty straightforward. I just kind of looked at it and said, what would I want to see if I was a fan? And fortunately, I am a fan of Playtonic, and I love Yooka-Laylee. I love their history, so it's very easy for me to see what I would want to see. And I thought about companies that have done similar types of things, that have produced kind of these premium editions and have sort of an iconography to it. That, you know, everything from looking at this company, I always reference Working Designs, that did these fantastic collector's editions, to, you know, little golden books that have great iconography in the way that they sort of harmonize all of their books. So they have kind of a collector's aspect to them. All of that was put into the thought, and then you just take it one step at a time. Okay, you know, I could just show the cover, but if I show a 3D book, you know, that is actually sculpted and has nice lighting, it'll be more convincing and it'll be more appealing. It also helped to look at other campaigns. Like I looked at, I really referenced Jake Parker's Skyheart Kickstarter for mine. Mine was very, very close to his, because I didn't quite do the add-on thing that he did, because I thought the add-on process was pretty confusing. But I just want,
like on mine, I've got some add-ons and I get questions and people don't really understand it. It's kind of, because Kickstarter is not really made for that. Like with mine, you just add, if you want to add another comic, you add $5 to your tier. And then at the end, I've got to send out a survey saying, well, which comic did you want? That definitely gets confusing, because it's not, there's probably third-party things that can do that for you, I'm sure. But yeah, well,
BackerKit, that's actually one of BackerKit's primary functions is the add-on store. So, and that is cool. It's just, I didn't really know how that all worked with BackerKit. And so when I went forward to do it, I thought, this add-on thing's confusing. If somebody comes here, they want a book, and okay, they want a book plus things. So they can just choose the thing they want. I don't want to make them do too much work. And then what I can do is I can sell the items individually in the BackerKit store, and then individually their price is a bit over what it would have been to buy it as a pack during the Kickstarter. And I did keep my promise. You know, there are Kickstarter exclusives that are not, you can no longer get. Like the Backer edition is done. So that's a 30-day item only. So you can limit the items that you can do in the add-on store.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one of the things, because you had talked about how in order to kind of do this successfully, you've got to sell like there's 2,000 books and you're a little over 1,000 or whatever now. But what I think is going to happen is once, I mean, of course, there was a little, you said there's a little hesitation from Platonic as far as running the Kickstarter and the whole thing, you know, because there's maybe not that proven track record. But I think once you get that book, and this book is going to be so beautiful based on everything I've seen, that once people have that in their hands, I mean, they can't help but to share that thing on social media. And then, and once the book is finished, Platonic isn't going to have any reservations about help you promote this thing or get this thing out, because it's done, it's proven, it's there, and it's beautiful. It's an awesome piece. So I think the long game is, I think it's kind of in your favor. I think I could definitely see that just because
and they've
books.
Thank you. And they've been wonderful about promoting. I know that when it releases, we're trying to kind of figure out things here and there that we can do that makes sense for everything. Platonic is a very, I'm going to say they're a conscientious company. They're smart about how they're operating. They actually have kind of an old school way of operating. I'm really happy with how they're proceeding, to be honest. And in fact, one of my favorite stories that I'm pretty sure I can say publicly, about that for people who might be interested is, this is the caliber of character of the head of the company. And I've never heard anything quite like this before. As they had their Kickstarter, and their intent was to try and reach whatever their goal was. I think it might have been something like $700,000 or something crazy. But they did set a relatively high goal. They ended up raising $3.2 million, right? But they hit their main goal in not only one day, but in 45 minutes.
Oh, okay.
From launch.
I want to talk. That'll segue into kind of some things I want to talk about with
okay. Well, I just like saying, so they were funded in 45 minutes, and the head of the company had left work, because it was on a Friday, and he had gone home, and they called him on the phone and said, "You got to come back to the studio. Everyone's celebrating because it was doing so well. They had already reached the goal." And he said, "I can't. I have to take my kids to go feed penguins." Which is just that's the that is the level of character of the person running that studio. Just in case anyone had any doubts of the goodness and kindness of these people, it's like, well, I'll get back to it when the time is right to look at our payment, but right now I have to take my children to feed birds because I promised them that I was going to take them. That's the way to operate. And more people in the industry were like that, we'd have a better industry for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So speaking of, like you said, I kind of want to touch on it. We probably got we've got another 20, maybe 30 minutes. I think we can go. But I wanted to. I mean, it seems like you're for the most part. I mean, and there's still work to be done and everything. But it seems for the most part that your Kickstarter was pretty much I guess would you say a rousing success, or at least?
I think so. I'm very happy with it. It was a great start for sure. I mean, I'm very fortunate. If you know, at the average graphic novel, Kickstarter does not bring that kind of money.
Yeah, and especially first time Kickstarter and everything.
Yeah,
it's pretty impressive. So I was just curious, like I kind of want to go into, like, if anyone's not familiar with some of the pitfalls I've had this time around, but what you were like. Basically, if you had any kind of bumps in the road and kind of how you handled that, because I think that's you know, kind of a good lesson for people that are interested in kind of what to avoid, because the best thing to do is to have other people make their mistakes for you. And then certain things aren't not necessarily things you can control, I think, in some of the cases, like what I'm going to bring up. But so you had mentioned how Platonic that they funded in within the first 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But that first 24 hours is crucial. No, one of the things I ran into was and this is something you really can't control, but when I launched my Kickstarter, and keep in mind, my previous Kickstarter, the majority of my backers came from Facebook. And at that point, I didn't have as big of a following on YouTube. I've got a little bit bigger following now. But the day I launched was the day that that Instagram and Facebook were down. I don't know if you guys are familiar. That happened a little less than a month ago. And so that kind of, in some ways, I'm wondering, you know, you like to think like, well, what would have happened if that wasn't the case? Because I just could not, you know, I couldn't reach those people, you know, and as a result, I think the campaign sort of got buried, because I remember, like, with the first campaign, at least if you went on there and it was like under like new projects or whatever, you would, I mean, you could find my project, but right now it's just so buried, you know, because I just didn't think it had that little oomph that I think that extra promotion would have helped out within that first 24 hours.
Right. So,
I mean, that was a big hurdle. And then just recently I lost about a week as far as promoting on Facebook and Instagram, because their algorithms, and we were talking about algorithms earlier. I don't remember if that was on the show or before.
It was just before, yeah.
Just before, yeah. But what happened was, because of the title of my comic book is Young and the Dead, that phrase got flagged as maybe harmful to children.
Oh boy.
But the big problem was, I mean, the big problem was I didn't know what the problem was. They just said that I was in violation of their community standards or the community guidelines or whatever. And I couldn't figure out why.
I told you not to post that photo of you without pants on.
Right. Well, I don't know. I'm thinking, I'm like, is it because I'm drawing zombies, and some of the zombies are grotesque and there's like entrails hanging out and stuff like that. And I'm like, is that it? But I see posts from like The Walking Dead and everything. And I'm like, how is that? Is that really that big a deal? And so did you
figure out what it was?
Yeah, well, I was just doing all this troubleshooting. I must have re-uploaded this video, and basically the video was just me, because when I'm doing these sketches, these original sketches, as part, certain tiers for the Kickstarter. If you back at a certain point, you can get one of these original sketches. And when I was doing that, I thought I had the foresight that I'm going to record all these sketches, and then I'll just speed them up, and I'll do little videos, and I'll put them out there. And that's part of the thing, is the amount of time I spent, editing these things and all this stuff, and just not being able to share it after you've spent days putting all the time into editing and doing all the voiceover and all that kind of stuff. So, but I didn't know what it was. So I used a different video, a zombie that wasn't as grotesque. That didn't work. I changed the voiceover because I didn't know if there was something I said. Because usually I've used, my stuff's on YouTube. YouTube has a music library where you can use certain songs that are okay to use on YouTube. And I had used a song from that library. I thought, well, maybe it's okay for YouTube, but it's not okay for Facebook. So I replaced the song. I mean, I was just back and forth. And the thing that I don't understand is that, because they've got these algorithms and these kind of robots that go out and scrub for all this content and everything, how hard is it for them to also, once they find something that they think is in violation, to just
tell you what it is,
tell you exactly what part of their terms of service or their guidelines that you're violating? I mean, that seems a very simple thing to do if you can do all this other stuff. I mean, there's different sections. You think the thing would be able to say, oh, this is a problem in section 4. This is what your problem is. This is, and maybe you can correct it. But, you know, so I just, you know, there's a thing on there that says you can have it reviewed. And I think now I might be okay. But now at this point, I don't, and it was in my URL because I created a custom URL, you know, it was, you know, youngandthedead.com. So that was also on Twitter. And for a while I tried to respond to people on Twitter and it says, you can't respond. You can't respond because you have some kind of weird link. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I didn't know what they were talking about. So it was just like, I mean, it was just like kind of a nightmare, and it's just like Facebook. But that's why, you know, what I was talking about before with, you know, sometimes when you're on other people's platform, whether it's Kickstarter or whatever, because I mean, Kickstarter could not come up with a rule. I don't think they will, but you know, that totally just, and I know some people, Kickstarter does certain things that offend certain people, and that's why some people have kind of moved from Kickstarter to Indiegogo or whatever. So, but you know, whatever it is, I mean, you know, you don't really have as much control over that stuff. So that's kind of why I'm trying to really concentrate on like building mailing lists and stuff.
Well, I can't even think of what your material how it would have been flagged. There's nothing about it that just seems like a freak accident.
Well, it's because, and I put up a video kind of explaining this or talking about it, but the thing is, they're basically robots, these algorithms, and they can't understand context or nuance or any of that stuff. So when they see 2 things that sound offensive, maybe together, there's no way for them to tell, is it really offensive, or is it a comic book that's pretty much for kids? I mean, some parents may have some objection to it. If you wouldn't want your kids to watch like Goonies, then maybe. But if you're okay with letting your kids watch Goonies, it's pretty much a kid's story. I mean, there's some zombies and some grotesque stuff, but it's a kid's adventure, you know. So it's just like, really,
it's so good for kids. Like, you get healthy storytelling in there. That's not, I mean, granted, they wouldn't know what the storytelling, but I don't understand that. I mean, there is, if it was an automated, that's why I really think it's probably an incorrect flagging or something like that, because it's just there's nothing in there that I can think that would set things up. Man, if your stuff gets flagged for that, then I when I do Dreamside, you know, which deals with pediatric cancer, and I have, you know, monsters that you know.
And I mean, you could run into that problem because there are certain things, you know, that if you read the contract, you'll see. I could see how maybe you could get flagged for something like that, but it's probably the same situation.
But, you know, to be honest, I'm not over Facebook, but I'm over Facebook in the sense that I don't think it's a really, first of all, I don't think Facebook is that much of a viable platform in the future.
I'm not a fan of Facebook at all, but
it's
but I did, like my last campaign, like I said, I did, and I ran some ads and stuff, but I haven't paid any ads because I just,
well, the Facebook ads are kind of, they've changed a little bit because they now work with Instagram, right? So, and Instagram can be more effective for that, but great. Okay. You know, I mean, you can do this and that with Facebook, and it does allow for direct engagement, but so does Twitter, and so does YouTube, really. And there are a number of other platforms. I think Facebook is having the worst of growing pains now. I think it's reached the worst of its teenage years right now. And maybe it'll pass it, and maybe it won't. I don't know. But I think Facebook has some real issues with it, and I think first of all, this is not even to get into the problems with social media and the way it seems to be affecting people's psyche and their emotional well-being, with, you know, being locked into these social media accounts that are they're not giving honest impressions of life. So I do have concerns with that, and I think Facebook is kind of at the top of that because it allows for kind of the most comprehensively edited view of different people's situations. So just compound all this together, and really all I do on Facebook now is I just mirror whatever I'm posting on Twitter or Instagram. You know, or really the best content I think is on YouTube, because you get a which I just wish I had more time to do more video content, but YouTube is the best because you can have a long form discussion like this. You know, you can have a much more honest look at things and take the time. And I think people seem to really be enjoying long form content. I know that when I'm working, I want to put a video on where people are talking like this, and they're going on for a long time, so I can just put it on in the background and let it happen while I'm working.
Artists tend to really enjoy that. Not everyone does, because sometimes I'll get things like somebody will flag one of my videos and put a timestamp on it that if you're looking for this, it happens at this point or whatever. Because some people just want that, and I understand that too, because there's certain times that I'm looking for just certain information. But yeah, I think YouTube is great. And I mean, Facebook is trying to implement video and stuff, but I don't think people are going to go to Facebook and sit there and watch a video like this long on Facebook.
No, I don't think so. I think that's kind of a weird thing, because you're forcing people to split up. Because really, what most artists honestly I think want to do is to consolidate. You know, is what we really ought to be doing. And this I think is very important advice to people. I don't see people taking advantage of this enough, including myself. Is the importance of building a mailing list that you control,
right?
Because social media accounts will change and drop. I mean, Twitter could completely shut down tomorrow, and you may have built 100,000 followers on Twitter, and you think you're on top of the world, and then suddenly you realize that your world is built on somebody else's property.
Yeah,
and they can just get rid of it if like that.
I think Google Plus just finally, this is the end. And there were some people in the beginning that jumped on there, early adopters, and they just had tons of people, but now it's gone.
Just gone, yeah. So if that's why I always ask people to subscribe, to my mailing list directly, because that way, I don't have that many people on there, but I have enough, that it's building and growing, and that's the slowest growth that I have. But it's the most important, because it's the one that if everything else shuts down, I can still communicate with people, and when you're trying to do things directly, like I'm trying to do, that's extremely important.
Yeah. And that's what I'm doing right now too. Like when I'm not promoting this Kickstarter, the main thing I'm promoting is the mailing list. And I created this comic maker starter kit, which is a bunch of digital products for making comics, and it's free. It's like, it was tons of work putting together, but I really wanted to offer value. And I mean, obviously, you know what that's all about, but that's something that I'm giving away for free. Plus the mailing list has added value, because I'm putting out exclusive videos. It's almost like a mini Patreon, but you just get it for signing up for the, there's little tips and things like little art hacks. And of course I'm promoting my stuff too as well, but you get a lot of value with that. So, so that's one thing I'm really concentrating on. I wish I would have started sooner, because I just started. I think I launched my mailing list maybe like 4 months ago. So, but it's growing, and everything. But
yeah. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this, because this is something that's been coming up recently. Just speaking of maintaining and selling directly, another way that I'm kind of old school is that the way that I view the industry in terms of our responsibility. In terms of how to interact with people and how to interact with customers. So I'm kind of I'm getting frustrated and amazed and kind of stunned actually at the degree of vitriol that seems to be happening with professionals engaging with customers. And it's interesting to me, because I'm thinking, customers are somebody who buys your book is a customer. Okay, right. You can, if you want to use artsy fartsy language, we can, but the fact of the matter is they're a customer. They buy your book and they're giving you money, and they deserve everything for that. Like you're on everything they want. You're on top of the world to me, if you support what I'm doing. And I can't imagine the kind of behavior that I'm seeing. And I don't know if it's kind of like it's the new cool thing to do, is to be kind of a jerk. But yeah, that's something that's really
not been my experience with anyone that at least in the crowd that I kind of hang out with. I mean, everyone's super supportive, and the artists and everything that kind of in the like communities that I'm involved with, and I try to do the same. But I've heard stories about.
Well, that's just especially, so the reason I bring it up is because I'm wanted to bring that up as something that I'm seeing enough that I think it's worth it to suggest to people who might take an interest in this, that's a really bad direction to take. That it might kind of I don't know, it might make you seem like the cool rebel of the group, but that's a slow road to failure. Sometimes it's a quick road to failure. So if you're going to be, if you're going to be promoting yourself and putting stuff out there, then you have to have basically eternal respect for people who buy what you make, and even if they come back and tell you some not so nice things, here and there, it's like, hey, that's part of the job. You're going to get, every now and again, you're going to get somebody who says something not so nice to you. Not so nice being an understatement. It happens here and there, but you just have to kind of figure out how to get past that. So that's kind of, I'm kind of dipping into a totally different conversation.
Yeah. Well, no one wants to come off as a jerk, but that's one thing I do want to kind of address real quick in the speaking of coming off like a jerk in the chats. Swatchy Inc. says, back when I was talking about the problems I had with Facebook and everything, he said, I still funded the book, and a lot of people don't. And I do realize that. And I don't want it to sound like I'm ungrateful, because the one thing, when I did eventually put out that video, talking about my problems on Facebook, that thing got shared like crazy. I mean, maybe not, it depends on who you're comparing it to, but based on my experience,
that's what got shared.
Yeah, things that because I think, again, people can relate to that, and it's kind of that thing once you get into, and that could be a slippery slope too, because once you get into things like, oh, Facebook look what Facebook did to me, and people get into that, it's like, I know Facebook, and then that kind of stuff gets shared out. So while I think that was warranted, and I had to do something to kind of hopefully, make up for lost time and let people know what the deal was, there's a danger of it getting kind of out of hand and getting into some sketchy territory. But I do want to say that, my community, especially on Facebook, I'm not Facebook, but on YouTube, that whole crowd and that whole community kind of did come out, and they helped me fund within, I think, the first 3 days. So I don't want to sound ungrateful at all. It is frustrating though, because you just wonder what could have been.
It's really just analyzing what exactly what could have been. It's the same thing when I say, okay, let's look at my campaign, because I was very fortunate with my campaign, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look and see, where can you improve? What did you do wrong? Maybe because there's always a next step you can reach, and you're trying to kind of figure out the best way to do that. I mean, imagine that you had a campaign that raised $200,000, and then you would say, okay, well, now that I raised this kind of money, look at the things I can do now that I couldn't do before, like get some help or hire a contractor. So it's always valuable to look and try and figure out what the next, just try and analyze what happened during campaigns, both good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, did you have any roadblocks at all? I mean, major things that might be kind of a teaching point for anyone watching?
Well, there were a few things that happened with the campaign. There wasn't anything really there wasn't any lightning bolts that just, threw me off. But there were a few things let's see, what was something? Everything launched smoothly. It was funny because I got approved immediately. I thought that was really weird.
That happened to me too. Other than part of the problem, I don't want to keep going and what might have been, but I was delayed a day. And if I wasn't delayed that day, I would have missed that day that Facebook was down. I mean, it was still the second day, but it would have been the first one. But because I had already run a campaign, I figured that my bank account and everything all that information was squared away, but I guess it wasn't. But once that was squared away, I went to go get it approved, and immediately it just says, you're approved. So
yeah, it was like an automated thing, unless there's some person just sitting there really anxious to approve projects.
Yeah, that was your first one, so that is kind of surprising.
It was. I think what might have been a factor in that is that I had communicated a lot with them along the building time, because I took a long time to build that Kickstarter page, just because I set up the page 2 or 3 months before I actually did the campaign, and then I just kept adding to it here and there, because I figured, why not I'll set it up early. It's kind of like the way I do art. I just rough things in, and then it's very easy to see what's wrong with it, because you give it enough time. It's easy to see errors that are very old compared to stuff you just did right now. So I think because of my communication with them, it might have been something where they kind of watched the campaign go, because I kept asking them questions. Probably drove them nuts, actually. I think between Kickstarter and BackerKit, I mean, I've emailed the BackerKit support person, who is an angel, probably no fewer than 90 times, I'd say, in the process of getting that together. So yeah, but they just keep putting up with me I'm too far away to punch, I guess is really what it is. So anyway, but yeah, it's into the other You know, it was probably the most significant thing that I would say is a big caution is be very, very careful with your goal amount. So there are a few ways to think about a Kickstarter, right? There is, let me raise exactly what I need to produce the products and make sure all my bills are covered. And you can do that properly or not. Like you can say, all right, I know that I've done all my math and it's going to cost me $10,000 to print the books, and it's going to cost me, you know, roughly $8,000 to ship them all out. Shipping is factored into the total. Be aware of that, which is one of the reasons that people don't raise nearly as much money as they think. Is a huge, usually like 20% of it goes to shipping at least. So, okay, $18,000, say, is what I know I need in order to get the items put together. And of course, that amount scales depending on how many people you have. Too few people, it might be even more expensive than 18 because you have a higher cost per item, right? So let's say you just say, all right, to be safe, I'll make the goal $20,000, okay? I could have made Yooka probably around 20,000. It would have been a risk, but I could have done it. But what I wanted to do was say, okay, this is the second way of thinking about Kickstarter, which is what's a proper budget? Something that would be a little bit more in line with if I hit this goal, like what's the minimum I want to raise in order for this to be a sensible proposition for me and not just the base minimum, the bare minimum of what I need to cover the costs. And the general, the almost universal advice you get is go with the former and just put the goal where you need it to be. Because oftentimes it's better to hit the goal earlier because it does often result in an overage and you might end up doing better overall. It's almost like an eBay auction. They say if you put like a reserve on your eBay auction, it actually hurts your end result because people don't bother to bid until it hit the reserve.
Right.
Whereas if it's a low amount, they'll bid right now and then it'll get a lot of action. So similar kind of psychology, I guess, there is keep the goal amount as low as you possibly can. So I put my goal amount at 40,000. Now I had a really strong day one support. I think we got maybe about $18,000 in the first day. So it was great. Now, if I had had a $20,000 goal, then by day two, we would have been funded.
Yeah.
You know, because day two, I think it went up another like $8,000, right? So
do you think Kickstarter would have seen that and that would have kind of boosted it more?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because Kickstarter, I believe, pays attention to the day one funders,
right.
And gives them a bit more, you know, because naturally they want to, the things that are doing well, they're going to push higher. I know it seems backwards. You think they should push the things that are not doing well, but the problem is just proportionately, if something's doing well, it's going to, and they push it, it'll do really, really well. Whereas something that's not doing well, even if they push it, it won't necessarily do that much better.
It's like the 80-20 rule. You know, you got to concentrate on the 20% that's making you the most money.
Yeah, right. So I'm sure that's how they're operating. So, but anyway, I think that would have made a big difference. So one of the things that I did to combat that is the real danger that you can run into, and I did hit this problem with the campaign, where you end up with the doldrums in the middle, you know, where things just kind of fade out. So you get that day one, day two, kind of day three, maybe day four excitement. And then it's by day 5, day 6, it sort of just stagnates usually. And then it stays that way, and it kind of gradually kind of picks up a little tiny bit at the end, and then the last day you usually get a boost. So that's kind of that's like 98%, I think, of Kickstarter campaigns, just logically how they would work.
Right.
But I thought, okay, so what I wanted to do was I was worried because I didn't hit the goal before I hit the middle days. And I thought, okay, great. So now I'm gonna pull in just a little tiny bit of money, and it's gonna take forever to get to the goal. And I thought there was actually a few times I thought, well, I might not hit the goal, you know, because we were at like 32,000, and it was almost halfway through the campaign. And I thought we were only getting like a few $100s every day. And I thought, actually, it's possible that this will not hit the goal, even though we had almost $20,000 in day one, just because I put it at 40,000. But then there was a conundrum, and I said, okay, well, if it didn't even hit 40,000, I wouldn't make enough money to do this anyway. And so that's where I kind of justified the higher goal amount. And even then, it barely brings in any real money in terms of paying me, but for 2.5 years' work. But there had to just be something in there because I still had a lot of work to do in the book, about 6 months to go. It wasn't finished. So I gave it a little bit of a jolt in the middle of the campaign by introducing a few new tiers. So what ended up happening was I introduced these higher tiers, 2 new high tiers. And what happened was there's a certain amount of people who were in the campaign who would buy the most expensive thing you have.
Right.
And so what I did was I introduced something that gave them, I did some testing with them, and I said, you know, to backers, what would you like? Because I want to introduce some more expensive stuff to try and encourage more backing, but also to encourage backers to up their pledge. And I said, what should I give you to make that a possibility? And so I ended up doing a tier with a metal pin. It's like an oversized metal pin and a cloth map of the world that's got like a hand-sewn border. It's actually got a bias tape border. Those are going to be hard to produce. But the cost was raised proportionally. Put like a ribbon marker in the book, and then I also offered a drawing, like to do a drawing on paper, the old way. So that I introduced at the highest tier, and then what people did is they sort of juggled people up. Okay, so people started upping their pledges, and then what happened is in one day, it was on Halloween, it went from 32 to 40. So I just what happened was right in the middle. If you look at my chart, it's a really unusual thing because it right in the middle is went pop right up in the middle. Wait, I'm mirrored. So am I doing this right with my hand? Well, it's in the middle. It's the same either way. So, but it popped up in the middle, and then it kind of sank back down, but then it picked up a bit. But hitting that goal in the middle, I think, is what resulted in the overage that I did get. Because just the sooner you can hit it, and then you got to do your marketing spin. So this is where you have your if you're funded day one, you get to brag about, I was funded in 24 hours. If you're funded day two, it says funded within 48 hours. Right. If you're funded in 2 weeks, like I was, just barely, you say funded in the first 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
And you just change that depending on how you do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, I mean, and that makes a lot of sense because anyone, in marketing knows that, it's easier to sell to your existing customers than to bring in new customers. So that's essentially what you're doing. You already had people that are invested in the book and you're giving them something extra. And I've had people, contact me and it's like, oh, I'm thinking about upping my pledge and all that. So yeah, I mean, that definitely, that's a smart. That's a smart.
Well, give people an option to do that. I mean, there's some people like, at first I thought, well, I don't want to, I'm not trying to gouge people with stuff. Like it has to be something that's of interest, but then I would ask people and they say, actually, if you do this, I'll back it immediately. And I thought, well, I may as well. I mean, it'll give me practice producing, ancillary things, which has also been fun to figure out how to produce all these ancillary products, which is its own challenge. But, you just do your work and figure out what it'll cost to make each one of them and just make sure that you're not going to lose money on it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know. I mean, we're getting close to an hour and a half or probably over that, but is there anything else that we wanted to mention about your Kickstarter experience or anything in general before we start kind of wrapping it up?
There's so much that we could still cover. And
well, we're gonna do something on your channel too. So we can continue this over there.
And we can expand into BackerKit a little bit. What might be fun is to talk a little bit about the post-campaign process, because BackerKit, what I can tell you this is that my impression of BackerKit was that it was going to be so easy because I'd already done all the work with Kickstarter. So I thought, well, I'll just go right into BackerKit, right? 3 months later, I launched the BackerKit store. So it was way more work to do BackerKit than Kickstarter.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad I look into that at the point, at least for my campaign, because just going back to like what you were talking about, and the amount of setting that goal and everything for me, because it's print on demand. I mean, I think I set a pretty modest goal based on it was a little more than what I asked for last time, but theoretically I could have just put $100, and if I only got like 10 people or 25 people that wanted comics, I could print that much, so it's a little different when it's print on demand. Maybe not $100, but you know what I mean? I could, so. Yeah,
the only last thing I would just say is probably, I would definitely consider doing Indiegogo for sure in your case. Given you're kind of the perfect candidate for that. Actually, you have a successful campaign in Kickstarter, but you also have something that you can produce more of without the need to consider a print run. Like my challenge, of course, is I'm trying to get all these orders in before I do the first print run, because if I get 500 orders after I've done my print run, they're so much more expensive. And these are the only reason I'm getting these books. I'm getting these books at a somewhat reasonable price. We're printing in the US. So we have American labor going into these books, and it's not cheap. And if you, particularly if you produce a small quantity, it is massively expensive. So I have to get as many in this first print run as I can. So your benefit with print on demand is that you're really just continuing to collect orders. I would just beware of the sort of all or nothing funding style. Another thing with Indiegogo, just to bear in mind, that I learned just recently, is that I guess when you back an Indiegogo, you get charged immediately.
Yeah, well, in some ways that could be a benefit, because I had just last week I had a number of, I mean, my campaign actually went backwards because I had some higher tier people back out. So, and that wouldn't be the case with an Indiegogo. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you might, I've had a few people reach out to me and ask for refunds, and you do what you have to do here and there.
Right.
I try to be reasonable with people, but with the charge immediately, it's not so much that it helps prevent backouts so much. It's more that it helps avoid charging issues at the end of the campaign, because when you run a campaign, sometimes people's payment situation might change. And sometimes with a charge, if somebody doesn't have available credit, or if they're, they might pledge for $100 tier and they only have $40 in the bank, they might get an overage. And if their bank doesn't do, protection for that, and that's a huge problem with BackerKit that I can cover next time as well. Is there's a very big conundrum in how people get charged, because you basically have the choice to charge people right away or wait until you're going to deliver, and that's like months later. So I'm very concerned that people think they're paying now, and but the money didn't get taken out of their account, and then suddenly they'll get charged 3 months later, and I'm worried about that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think, and another thing to consider is, I mean, you couldn't do your type of book like what you're talking about, because for one, it's the nature of the book with it hardcover, full color. See, mine's a black and white book, so
you mean for print on demand?
Yeah, for print on demand.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're doing color print on demand, that adds a little more. But if black and white, it's not super expensive to produce. So.
If you produced my book, like if you made one of my book, it would cost, I think I got a price on it because I was just curious. It was something like $800 to do one book.
Sure.
Like I'd have to pay $800 to get my one book, because it has so many custom features in there that. But as soon as you up the quantity, of course, it drops below what you're trying to charge for it.
All right, David. So where can if somebody wants to go to your BackerKit store and pick up?
Oh yeah, if you want to buy a book, Yeah. Well, I'll put a link to it. I think there's a link in the description, right?
Yeah, there is a link in the description. I should probably go back and leave a link to your YouTube channel, just so people can follow you, and if they want to see us continue this conversation, either this weekend or at the latest Monday, because my Kickstarter is going to be completed. I mean, it's going to be done on Tuesday. So
right. Okay, well, I put a link in the chat as well, but it's in the description, and that's to the store. But then, if you want to join my mailing list, you can go to Dream.
Yeah, I'll have to put that in the actual. Let me copy. I'm going to copy that and wait. It went away because no one can see that chat but me. The one you posted in.
Oh, okay.
Let me. Where is it? Where is it? Okay.
Well, yeah, that, and then if you want to follow along, like I said, the best thing, you can find me on all the social media at Dream Prism Press. But if you want to be the biggest supporter, you can go and subscribe to my mailing list at dreamprismpress.com and go ahead and put your email in there and help me avoid the problem of the inevitable collapse of social media.
Yeah, and definitely go check out Dave's art, because it really is amazing. Once you see it, your chances are you're going to fall in love with it, because it's really amazing.
Oh, appreciate it.
In addition, I've got a Kickstarter running right now. You can go to youngandthedead.com. I can say that because I don't think YouTube has the same algorithms as Facebook and Instagram. So go to youngandthedead.com, and both Dave and myself, both of our campaigns are in the description of this video. I wanted to thank everyone in the chat. I didn't see a whole lot of, there were some comments and things. I didn't see a whole lot of questions. Hopefully I didn't miss any. People did have questions other than, hey, how you doing, and stuff like that. Thanks for everyone tuning in the chat, and follow Dave on his YouTube channel. Hopefully I'll remember. I'll go put the link to that as well, because we'll be talking more about this on his channel in the next few days. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, and thanks so much for everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll see you guys later. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Thank you.